Okay guys, here is Wednesday's today's number. That's kind of a tongue twister. Wednesday's today's number. And for this one, I'm going to try to really focus in on why we use expanded form the way we do with decimals. So I'm actually going to skip to that slide and just focus on that to start with. Okay, so here we are looking at this very large number, and we're going to write it in expanded form. And for our whole number values, I do expect you to include exponents. But before we get to any of that, I just want to focus in on our decimal amounts and try to help you understand why we write those the way we do using expanded form. So for this decimal amount, we would read this 569 thousandths. You could also think of that as being 569 out of 1,000 equal pieces. So to help us visualize what we're talking about when we say 569 thousandths, let's look at our decimal grid, and let's just focus on this one place value position at a time. So we're going to start with, what does 5/10ths look like? That's this part of my number. I'm going to shade in 5/10ths. Here's 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, and 5/10. Now, hopefully you're also thinking, oh, 5/10, that's the same as 1/2. If you ate 5/10 of a pizza, you probably wouldn't say, I ate 5/10 of a pizza. You'd probably say, I ate half the pizza. So already our decimal amount, we're up to 1/2. And as we go into our hundredths place, we're going to be moving over 1/2. So this amount is greater than 1/2. So now we have 6 hundredths to add to that. So to shade in 6 hundredths, I'm going to use my red highlighter tool. Here's 1 out of 100, 2 out of 100, 3 out of 100, 4 out of 100, 5 out of 100, and 6 out of 100. Okay, and then last, I'm going to shade my thousandths place, which is here, and I would represent that. Oh dear, I'm running out of space. I hate that. Okay, so I would represent that 9 thousandths, or 9 out of 1,000. And when I shade that, it's going to be 9 of these itty-bitty little thousandths here. Okay, 9 thousandths. Okay, now, yesterday I told you that when we write expanded form with decimals, what we do is we take the digit and then multiply it by the fraction form of that place value position. So this one would be 5 times 1/10. You could also write it like this, it would be correct. You could write it either way. Plus the digit that's in your hundredths place, 6, times 1 out of 100. Plus, okay, or you could write it in decimal form, would still be correct. Plus, last digit, which is a 9, times 1 out of 1,000. Okay, so that's how you would write your decimal amounts in expanded form. So now my job is to try to help you understand why we use this form here. And to help you think about that, let's just look just at this statement here, 5 times 1/10. Would you agree that another way to read that would be 5 groups of 1/10? So if I were to come back up here to my visual, do I have 5 groups of 1/10 represented here? 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, and 5/10. Yes, I do. So when you multiply, this 5 here is a whole number. It's saying 5 times 1/10 gives you 5/10, or you could also write it like this. Okay, so that seems like a true statement. Okay, so here I have my 5 groups of 1/10. Now let's look at this statement here, 6 times 1/100th. And then lastly, looking at our 9 times 1,000 structure for writing it in expanded form. And the structure is digit times fraction or decimal form, digit times fraction or decimal form. Whoops, I wrote that one wrong. Good thing I'm looking back at this, huh? That should be a 1, my bad. And then digit times fraction or decimal form. Basically just memorize this format, or just to give us one last, let me rewrite it over here so we can just kind of focus on it. 6 times 1/100th. You could also write it like this. So you can read that 6 groups of 1/100th. And when we look at our visual model, can you in fact see 6 groups of 1/100th? Here they are. That's 6 groups of 1/100th. So for me, I always think these visual models are the best way to kind of understand what we're doing mathematically here. So I just imagine when I'm doing my expanded form, I double check, do I have 6 groups of 1 out of 100? Yes, I do. They're right here. To our visual model, we want to make sure that we can see that. And here it is. That's our little itty bitty 9 groups of 1/1000ths. Easy, so we're going to practice it. But your job is a little practice one. You can write it like this, or you can write it like this. Both are correct. That's 9 groups of 1/1000th. And so I'm going to put it over here. There it is, teeny tiny. Okay, guys, so hopefully that helped. That's the why for writing these decimals in expanded form. Now your job, and it's not, get a piece of paper and do it with me. Pause my video and see if you agree with what I'm showing you. Go into here. Okay, so if you had, let's say, how would you read this decimal? $362,000ths is how I would read that. So for my expanded form, I'm going to take my tenths, and then my hundredths, and then my thousandths, and I'm going to have digit times fraction form plus, so we're going to have 3 times, this is my tenths place, so I can write it like this. Or you can write it in fraction form, plus, now let's go to our hundredths place, digit times 1/100th plus, now we're on our thousandths place, digit times 1/1000th. Okay, So we're multiplying 3 groups of 1/10, 6 groups of 1/100th, 2 groups of 1 out of 1,000.